All right, welcome. This is our living library, and this is the second installment of a series that I'm calling Trauma Sensitive Leadership. So I'm with my good friend Randy, and I will be connecting this conversation to all of the conversations that I've had with Randy over the last year at this point. So Randy, I'm going to just let you introduce yourself and talk about what is driving you today. What is something you're up to at this moment? I also just want to remind everybody that if you're watching this and you're a member of the Karmic Margin Call Project Time Bank, you can log the hour that you are watching this as a service provided. Just put that under the workshop presentations and just make a note that it's a living library conversation that you have viewed. So, Randy, what is alive for you today? How are you arriving? What are you bringing? What's new?
Well, what's new? Since the last recording, my wife and I and our little dog Peanut have relocated across the country. We went from Las Vegas, Nevada to Knoxville, Tennessee. So, yeah, pretty big change. Get to live with my friend John. John is my oldest friend. I've known him since kindergarten. Um, yeah, it's John's helping us get our feet underneath ourselves financially again. Um, Long story that could go on for hours. What prompted this and what's transpiring, but yeah, I would surmise it as right now is a fresh start, a new beginning, and gee, ironically, it's the middle of April. This is Palm Sunday. It's springtime. It's a time when nature is cycling into a new beginning. So yeah, things are going, like life it is in seasons of, I don't know, winter and seasons of spring and stuff. There's just the cycles of life. But all in all, we're optimistic. Life, all in all, is pretty darn good.
Very good. Very good. And how is your writing going? I see that you've been writing quite a bit. And tell me about your journey at the moment as far as writing and sharing and giving insights to help people develop easier ways of doing things.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so the first endeavor that I started, I don't know, was it 7, 8 months ago now? Easier Ways, stories of people recovering the joy of living. That was going on, and I was in flow. I was really kind of surprised when I'd read back what I was writing, and then I was inspired to write a companion piece. If I was going to be help, that was predominantly for people that are struggling with staying sober
Yep.
and they don't necessarily gravitate towards traditional recovery methods, church and such as that. They're basically trying to figure out on their own. So I certainly don't want to give the answers, but I do want to point in a direction where people can find their own answers. Or again, however the journey is, I can share my experience, my strength, my hope. But yeah, the gist of it is the answer is connecting with our inner wisdom, our soul is the path of finding what we seek. Anyway, companion piece. Now for the family members, same basic message, just a different emphasis. So I write these two books, and when I'm done, I'm proud of myself. But doggone it, these are pretty darn long books. They were like 400. They are about 400 pages long.
Mhm.
So I'm like, probably nobody wants to read all this and stuff. So what I'll do is I'll cut it down to the gist, which is just the framework, my optimization of the 12-step process.
Mhm.
So I did 3 books in like eight months. Or should I say those first 2 books led me to write the one that I didn't know I should be writing in the beginning. Now, today, before we hit record and stuff, it's led me to another one that if anyone's familiar with the 12-step process, they believe that it is a spiritual awakening. There is a spiritual solution for this. So I'm now writing something in a similar manner about that, proposed solution. So whether you are in or not in a 12-step program and you're curious about this thing called a spiritual solution,
Mhm.
I'm doing basically a fourth book. So when the dust settles, maybe that was what all those books led me to write as well. I don't know.
Mhm.
But it has been allowing me to get stuff out that has been percolating in between my ears for many years. So
Yeah.
it's been a good. process of healing for myself.
Very good, very good. And what really attracted me to you and your work as well, Randy, is this kind of acknowledgement and this immersion into the 12-step process of a spiritual awakening, if you want to call it that. So what we'll be talking about today is, how does one kind of take the first steps into that? With this series, this is about, trauma sensitive, and what that means to me is that a lot of times when things get confrontational or competitive, what I've been finding more and more is that there's trauma. There's trauma that does not want to be acknowledged. I've been noticing it within myself, and the benefits for me of just being trauma informed or cultivating a trauma sensitivity is that I can kind of keep from playing the victim and keep from blaming others, and kind of bring it back to my own growth. Oh, okay, where are my limitations? Where can I help somebody? Where can I, provide space? And also, most importantly, when do I need to set a boundary or a limitation as well too? Because my trauma is getting, getting activated here, or I might be activating someone else's trauma. So with these 12-step programs, I know that the last conversation I had with this was with Janet Berkowitz, who does Suicide Anonymous, and there's a 12-step process to that. So Randy, tell me about your experience with the 12-step process. How does I'd like to hear more about the connectiveness, about how that relates to a spiritual awakening. So I'd like to hear more about your experiences with that.
Okay, so I'm felt compelled to express my definition of trauma, and I'd like to know yours as well, Mike.
Sure.
So my understanding is that trauma is the residual emotions, thoughts are intertwined with those emotions. But there was a time in our lives we felt unsafe,
Hmm.
and we have not yet processed that emotional energy. It's within us.
Hmm.
Now, myself, I might describe it as like, hey, look, big boys don't cry was instilled upon me growing up. So naturally, yeah, I just would push that down, wouldn't express it. But when there was being, I don't know, a cause for I don't know, memories of that experience. Let me rephrase it. When I am triggered
Hmm.
in an instant, I'm going back to being that person that was frightened. That whole fight or flight, freeze or fawn stuff manifests in an instant, and it's not really related to that instance that is triggering me.
Hmm.
It's what it's doing. It's bringing what's unconscious to the conscious, and yeah, now yeah, dang it, danger. Take care of this thing as well. That's my babbling of a definition. What is your definition of trauma, Mike?
Yeah, no, it's not babbling at all, Randy. That's much of that resonates with me. Yeah, what comes up for me around trauma is being in that place or being in that frame of mind where something is triggered from the past experience, where you don't have all of your faculties about you. You don't have the capacity to think clearly. You don't have the capacity to listen. You don't have the capacity to be present. And as I'm going deeper and deeper into trauma informed practices, or trauma sensitive leadership is kind of my little twist on that. There's certain values that make it possible to be able to collaborate effectively, to be able to really listen and receive and respond without going into confrontation or going into defensiveness. And one of those is peer support, meaning we live in a system where we're often entrained, or we're often looking to an authority to tell us what's right or wrong, good or bad, and whatnot. And for me, and I'll just speak for me personally, that just doesn't work anymore. That doesn't feel right to me. So peer support, being a value of trauma informed care or trauma informed practices, means that everybody is on the same playing field. We're here to support each other. We're not here to give unsolicited advice. We're not here to We're not here to struggle over power. We're peers. We've had similar experiences. I've been through some intense experiences as well too. And it's not about, like you had just said earlier, it's not about giving people the answers. It's about providing the space where one can find their own answers within. So that's what comes up for me around trauma is these values. One of them is being in safe. Safety is a big value. Trustworthiness and transparency, that's another value in trauma informed care. Being clear about the communication about what what is the goal, what is the intention. And oftentimes I find myself trying to be more transparent in that the intention is just to have a conversation. It's just to help each other find the answers within. There is no, to me, there is no right or wrong. It's what works for you, and how can we build deeper trust. So my answer might not work for you. So the transparency piece around that is, I don't know if I'm going to bump up against anybody's trauma. I don't know if my own trauma is going to be bumped up against. So I don't know if any conversation or any meeting or whatnot is going to turn into a shit show. All I know is that I'm here to be with you, and I'm here to explore with you and spend time with you, so that we can find our own answers within. So that's my rambling. Yeah.
So to segue in, then to answer is we spoke about, if anyone's viewing this has ever gone to a 12-step meeting of any malady. 12 steps have been applied to pretty much everything that people have to deal with. I just happen to be from the grandfather of them all, the Alcoholics Anonymous. But if you go to a meeting, what Mike was speaking about is the intention of the group. When a person identifies, or again, there's a group of people saying, "Hi, I'm an alcoholic," that is to let people know that they're in a space with people that are, with similar experience, similar type of suffering and stuff. Back to, again, it's setting the stage that we're all peers. And then in preambles and stuff, they try to set the stage as well. But in general, yeah, in having a meeting and such, there's a thing that is frowned upon called crosstalk. So if somebody was to share something, whatever it is, and another person starts speaking directly to what was shared and stuff, that is basically unacceptable behavior and stuff. Now, does it happen? Yes, because, well, we're humans and all that kind of stuff. And basically, again, all of this in an AA meeting, or I presume in other 12-step meetings, are designed to create the space that you've just talked about, Mike. Now, it gets more intimate when you're working with your mentor, also called as a sponsor in it as well. It takes time to build trust. For myself, I had unknowingly, again, built this like force field around myself because I was hyper vigilant. I just had felt attacked so many times in my life and such. Part of the reason why I had created a persona, a facade. I thought people, needed to be strong. I needed to be smart. I needed to show the world I was successful. I need to convince myself of these things and stuff. So there was a narrative going on, and again, just an act that was falling apart, proving itself ineffective as it was moving on and stuff, but still was keeping it up. So again, being in a safe space where all of a sudden I can say things that I couldn't say anywhere else, or be asked questions that provoked contemplation of things that I never done. That is just basically what the whole process is in that culture. So again, these are kind of, I don't know, universal truths. Uh,
Oh, you still there, Randy? Rose up a bit on me. There you go.
many work environments and such. The people I'm working with do not have that understanding of human nature, where again, basically, if we don't feel safe, we are going to protect ourselves. Um, I have many times in and out of recovery and stuff lied by omission.
Mm,
I just don't tell people what's going on for fear that this is going to cause unintended consequences. Now, again, if I was talking to a boss that set up the conversation much like Mike does and stuff, I might be prone to say, "Wait a minute, yeah, I'm not okay. This situation is not okay," and I would like to collaborate with you to make this so it may not solve the problem, but it's not as big of a problem and stuff,
right,
and we can all be more productive and get what needs to be done.
right.
Um, Kind of a long answer, but I again, my worldview is very much through the personal experiences of recovery and 12 step because it did basically solve a lot of my problems, and then those that it didn't solve, it minimized for these reasons I just shared. Just
Hmm.
feeling safe in my
Yeah.
human experience, words do not do it justice.
Mm,
But we hear people have heard things about regulated nervous systems and equanimity and all those kind of words and stuff that don't necessarily get discussed, at least
yeah.
not in my words until I got into this world. Once again, I can be comfortable in my own skin. It's been so much easier to, again, just do life, to collaborate instead of compete.
Yeah.
Again, when you're not afraid of people, you're much more likely to, I don't know, explore options. So
Yeah.
it's a little more exciting as well. So, um, yeah, it's these are things that I wish were more common discussion. I really would have benefited if I had heard this at an earlier age. I
Mm,
was very fortunate to go to one of the best school districts in the state of California. Cupertino School District is Silicon Valley. So again, if you don't have to have gone to Cupertino, if you know this is where Apple and all the Google and all these companies are around, it's a pretty, kind of say, elevated educational environment.
mm,
You know, brilliant minds and kids of brilliant minds and stuff are there. And we never got into emotional intelligence or anything like that. Now, granted, I'm 60 years old. All those companies were still probably in the garages and stuff. But my point is if I'm someone who had the privilege of going to one of the best educational public school systems in America, and they never ever got into this stuff, I'm pretty sure this is not something that's taught at an early age. But if I had understood this simple truth of human behavior, my life would have been much easier. I could have set boundaries, what was acceptable and what was not, my self-respect, again, my ease of being me,
mhm.
warts and all, would have existed. I think if more people were not so concerned of what I would call punishment, unintended consequences, whatever, for there's like being judged, condemned, fired from my job because all of a sudden I just said, no, this isn't cool, you know,
Which happens
and
often. Yeah.
but I need to keep a roof over my head, so I put up with it. And again, those unintended consequences of low self-esteem, resentments, regrets, and all that kind of stuff. It was just, I don't know, kind of like an acid that just was burning away inside in my soul and stuff. And again, it was part of the reason why I drank and so much. It was a relief from those types of feelings that were just not conducive to well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, what's coming up for me as you're also speaking about, going to one of the better school districts in California as well too, is that yeah, there is very little formal education on emotional awareness and emotional intelligence. One of the other values of trauma informed care as well too is understanding the cultural, the historical, and the gender stories around what comes up. So yeah, so that's the kind of thing where a lot of the practices I've been cultivating recently with our with our mental health bridge group as well too is how to have conversations where we separate the stories or the judgments based on our gender or our culture or the history that we are aware of, from the facts or the data, from the feelings. And that's where people, I've noticed a lot, there's the facts. It's very hard for people to remember the facts of what actually happened. We're often lost in the stories, and those stories are colored by our, by our experiences, by our culture, by, where we were raised. So, one of the things that I was reflecting on recently was, about, being a man, and if a man is abused, or if a man is under abuse, do they have the right? Do we, as men, have the right to be able to, to be able to talk about that, to be able to, to call that out, to express that. And, you know, I would love to revisit what you had just said on that social media exchange as well too, that abuse is abuse. And, how do we set those boundaries? How do we communicate, what is okay and what is not okay? So yeah, so I wanted to reflect back that I really appreciated you chiming in on that exchange on social media, because that's part of, that is part of what being trauma sensitive is about. That even if, you're not in physical danger, we men oftentimes, I would say there's a lot of times we feel like we're in emotional danger, where it's not safe to be who we are, where it's not safe to set boundaries, or it's not safe to be vulnerable. Um, yeah, I'm talking too much. I want to hear your reflection, on that as well too, about cultural, gender, and historical stories.
I kind of chuckle because yes, usually you do not talk as much, but I love hearing you express yourself.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, so but that's the thing. I guess kind of segues into is like how many times in our lives have we been in a space where we can express ourselves freely? I don't know how many. Count them on maybe my two hands. Maybe I'm 61 years old. Maybe 10 times I've been in a situation outside of recovery, I should say, and stuff where I've been able to express. It's like, man, you know what? Every time I try to tell you this isn't cool, you blow up and you turn me into being the bad guy.
Yeah.
That is just not working here. The few times it was how feeling liber it was like I had been carrying an 80-pound backpack around and I just finally took off that weight. And wow, I could stand up a little bit straighter and stuff. And again, this is back to the self-esteem, the self-respect. It was like, wow, okay, finally I expressed myself and I said enough is enough. Um, but for whatever reason, and my hypothesis is again just being a culture where people just kind of gaslight you and dismiss you. It's like, dude, just stop being this way, man. Have a beer. Can we talk about sports or something? Not to be too cliche about it, but yeah, it's just in my limited experience and stuff, it was never ever encouraged to have these types of conversations. And when they did come up, because we hadn't practiced them, again, and basically we didn't know how to, again, myself and other men and even women and stuff. There's certainly been some women that are just like, dude, what are you, a pussy? Excuse my language to anybody listen here and stuff, but that was like the language that was used. It was derogatory and stuff. Guys
Yeah.
aren't supposed to be this way. Um, Now, in later years, just recently, I discovered something called being a highly sensitive person, HSP. And
Mm.
as I've done my research on this, is to understand this is not necessarily a condition, but according to the things that I've done in my research, read a few books and blog posts and stuff about it, there's a fairly high percentage of humans that qualify as with this characteristic that we're emotional empaths and all this kind of stuff. I I used to kind of feel ashamed when I would be watching a television show or a movie and I'd start crying, you
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
and it's my wife. Oh, that's so nice. You can express yourself, but it's just okay, that it's wonderful that I have a woman accepts me and embraces me and stuff. There's again why I felt awkward with it and stuff. You know, oh, you can try to downplay it. Oh, I must got some dust in my eye and all this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of guys that are very emotional, very empathetic to others' needs and such. And in a culture that's considered weakness, they
Yeah.
try to, like as I did, try to hide this. And again, it's almost, well, again, for myself, it's not almost, it was a source of shame. To be ashamed of who we are. And, again, maybe it's not always appropriate if I was like in a workplace situation and stuff, if I did start crying, probably that would not necessarily be conductive for the conversation to convey the ideas back and forth. Well, who knows? Again, it's in generalizations, but um, yeah, we need to be in a situation where if I was in the workplace, and I was talking to my superior and such, again, how this is not okay, and I was starting to cry, that would not have been considered as a mark on my record, you know, that, oh my God, I can't even talk to this Randy guy, can't even talk about the problems that are going on in the office here without bawling like a baby. That's the criticism that I can imagine would happen, whether it is or not. So lots and lots of words to say that, yeah, if we could be in a again a safe enough situation during our developmental years,
Yeah.
whether it's at home or it's in the schools, then it's likely to transcend them when we get into the workplaces where, um, yeah, again, it's just, again, where we need to express ourselves when again, for whatever, whether it's real or imagined, we feel unsafe. Okay. Because yes, then the other side of the coin is there are people that are abusive in this world
Oh yeah.
that, for whatever reason, will do things that require you to set boundaries. This is the simplest, politest way to do that. Um, and they probably, again, when realize that they can get away with it, is
Yeah.
why they perpetuate that type of behavior as well. And that probably, again, was incidents during their developmental years and stuff where
Mhm.
they saw that they could get whatever they were seeking done by using this type of behavior. I'll use the word manipulation and
Yeah.
stuff. And yeah, it's just again, it's really, if there's something I could do with the remainder of my life, not in specific tasks, but it is in a general paradigm that I could get going, a movement per se. So I dream audaciously big and stuff is to help humans feel safer in their human experience, men,
Yeah.
women, and such. If just feel safer being a human being. Um, these challenges that we face in these hypothetical situations, they're a lot less likely. A lot of the problems that exist in the workplace, in the homes, um, again, I have no idea what the percentage of them would be to diminish, but I think it would be easier to get through life. Life will
Hmm.
still be hard. There'll be plenty of challenges and stuff, but I think that it's more likely for us to get along and collaborate instead of competing.
Yeah.
You know, and hence the name easier ways of this thing I'm doing is it's this, having emotional awareness,
Yeah.
self-awareness, not necessarily just about our behavior patterns, which is helpful, but just to understand right now, I'm able to name what I'm doing. You know,
Hmm.
I am feeling afraid right now and such. And if I can pause long enough to name that emotion and such, I'm less likely to react and I can respond. I can make a more informed decision than that trigger I spoke about before. And again,
Right.
having leaders that can create that space, I, based upon my experience, it is an innate type of thing. Again, if we feel safe, we are less likely to react, and we
Mhm.
can respond. And then our amygdala kicks in, takes over where the limbic brain was. Use
Right.
bigger words.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, what's alive for me as well too, and this is very relevant to some of my more recent experiences, is recognizing that there is also trauma at work when people are being manipulative or they force you to set boundaries. And what has been helpful for me recently was just kind of understanding that that's a limitation, that maybe because of how their early experiences has them hardwired, that maybe they're just not capable at this time to have an emotionally aware, uh, low stakes conversation without being confrontational, and supporting each other in being able to walk away from it if it's going to be conflict, or if conflict is inevitable. So that's something that I've recently found just beneficial, from understanding that you know, my going into an experience being triggered and reliving trauma is not going to help somebody who is, using such tactics of manipulation or narcissistic type of methods, to be able to, to manipulate my emotions. So that's something that was recent, that I had recently, discovered as well. With these conversations as well, what I'd like to also encourage is brave space, because in a lot of in our society, it's a lot of my colleagues have really come to the conclusion that there really is no such thing as completely safe spaces anymore, but there are brave spaces where we can support each other in creating safe spaces. And one of the things that I'm trying to encourage is more bravery and transparency around religion, politics, spirituality. So we can listen to each other's stories without that judgment. So getting back to the spiritual awakening of this, Randy, what is your story? What is your story around a spiritual awakening? What is your understanding of spirituality?
Ooh, is a good one. Because actually, I was in a group here in Knoxville just yesterday where we got into this kind of stuff. So for those that get back to the 12 steps, the 12 step is stated, having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. We practice these principles in all our fare and help the man who's still suffering. Okay. So again, that's if you were to look at it as a linear process, but it's not. It's actually a cycle. But again, the what you're shooting for when you begin is to have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. Now, what was yesterday was discussed in a conversation talking about the economy of spirituality, which God, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail right now because I could, but this the word spiritual awakening get brought up. And this woman just said, what is a spiritual awakening? She was citing a friend of hers that my interpretation of the story she shared was basically confirmational bias.
Mhm.
He was now all of a sudden, you know, having a it's like amen brother kind of thing. And is that really a spiritual awakening? And which caused me to go, wonder how much of what I've labeled as a spiritual awakening isn't just confirmational bias for myself. I read books and all that kind of stuff. It's like, that sense of peace and calm. Oh, okay, I have this moment and stuff. And who knows? It just might just be nothing more than I'm well fed and I've slept well the night before, kind of stuff. Which led me to conclude is today that if somebody asked me, it's like, how did you know you had a spiritual awakening? Well, I just shared it with you folks. I feel safer in my human experience.
Yeah.
I know there's an okayness. I can see chaos. I don't deny the problems, the chaos, the confusion that's within myself and those around me. To understand, yeah, that basically the status quo are people that are just incapable of even contemplating these things that we're talking about today for whatever reason and stuff. But yeah, this is not necessarily stuff. Again, as I talked about, hey, guys don't want to talk about this stuff. Like, have a beer. There are certainly people that, heck, dinner last night and stuff. I started getting into this, and my wife put her hand on my thigh and just like, Randy, you're getting carried away, kind of stuff. She could sense these people didn't want to swim in that deep of the water,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And again, that's just that's what I'm interpreting in stuff that's not always a safe space and stuff, but a brave space. Whether it is to express myself or to not, again, to kind of filter what's being shared um, appropriately. That was my interpretation of to add on. It's like to have that again. It's just an awareness. Using Michael Springer's definition from the book The Untethered Soul, spirituality is awareness of my awareness. So that
Mm-hmm.
combined with it as well too is um, if I can just take two steps back and everything isn't as impersonal as it once was, that type of thing is like, okay, this person is responding to the words I'm saying in this kind of way, and it may or may not be me. Why don't I take two steps back? And it's not about me trying to convince this person or try to protect Randy and stuff.
Right.
If I can be detached but still present, if that makes sense and
Yeah.
stuff. It's this thing that's really difficult for me to describe. And I think the writing's been helping me try to put words to this experience. But when, okay, I'm present there and I'm in the moment, but it really doesn't involve my personality. This is
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily Randy and Mike getting in and having an argument here. This is two people having an argument right now that both people have thoughts and feelings about the topic, but it really truly isn't um, as important as I'm making it out to be. If that makes sense, there's um, an awareness of my awareness. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, right now, it's like, oh, you just went back to being that 10-year-old kid who had to defend himself, with some teacher that was telling him, that he was an idiot and he was wrong for expressing his thoughts and his feelings about, the assignment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. The spirituality as the awareness of your awareness. That's it comes back to mindfulness as well too, as being able to self-regulate and self-moderate. The feelings that come up and the stories that we're telling ourselves, especially when they're that deep-rooted when you were 10 years old and having that experience again. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've covered three already. So the fourth value of trauma informed care that I would like to call attention to in trauma sensitive leadership is empowerment, voice, and choice. So they kind of lump that all up into one value: empowerment, having a voice, and being able to have choices or to see your choices. When have you felt empowered, Randy? When have you felt most empowered?
Well, again, it's just what I've been sharing in our time together and is recording, these kind of examples. But um, I'm right now kind of giddy because of the books I spoke about earlier and stuff. My language for the spiritual awakening, for the 12 step, what I've called my optimization, is finding your voice. And it's connecting with my essence, my being, my soul, and such, and being again guided. What I'm referring to is wisdom in this books and my writing. Wisdom not necessarily being knowledge gained over life experiences. It's intuition, it's inspiration. It's that which comes from within. Um, and those moments again where, oh gosh, uh, is a workplace situation and stuff where um, I was deflecting responsibility. I'm not going through a big long story here of all the things that were going on, but I deflected and I realized that I was lying basically,
Mhm.
and to find the courage to go
Yeah.
to person in the workplace who happened to be higher up on the totem pole, and make an amends, apologize that certainly, they were not deserved of the deceptions that I was trying to perpetuate, and not just say I'm sorry, but what I need to do is to make things right and have so to feel empowered enough, courageous enough to say I was wrong.
Yeah.
Probably as I walked away again, a little bit lighter. Again, it stood a little bit taller. It's like going, this is the man that I aspire to be. You
Hmm.
know, I have done plenty of things that I'm not proud of, which, hey, again, I'm certain there's some people here listening, yeah, not everybody is pure as the the driven snow and stuff. We all make mistakes. We all blow it for whatever reason. Again, for
Yeah.
myself, fear is typically the reason. To demonstrate the behavior of the man that I aspire to be,
Hmm.
um, again, I think the sensation again, when I'm trying to put words to again, is just kind of sort of that wisdom thing reminding me, going, yeah, this is the life that you've desired. This is the life that you have available for you if you do a few simple things, like being
Mm.
honest, minded, willing to do the hard things that I've been avoiding. Those are principles that are ingrained into the 12 steps. It's basically the principles underneath the first three steps.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah. Again, it's interesting again how this is tying in together with the voice that I'm speaking of. I really truly believe that we all have this within us. It of course is a hypothesis, you know, but back to inspiration and intuition and stuff. This I'm pretty darn convinced of. So, what are your thoughts? Again, does everybody have, in their own unique way, something like this with them?
I think so, but it's a muscle that needs to be developed. It's not something that, at least in my experience, I'm not going to speak for anyone but myself. I think it's something that can be developed, but there does, in my experience, need to be a willingness and you know a little bit of being brave enough to not be good at something, to suck at something, to be vulnerable and to start to get comfortable in that, to enjoy that. One of the things that came up recently in within my spiritual community is we have this value that everyone is free to walk their own path and no one needs fixing. But when we're uncomfortable, we feel like we need to fix each other or we need to fix a situation. So my observation was, I think the way forward is, or anyone who wants to pursue this path, we're going to have to get comfortable in that paradox of having this deep rooted understanding that nobody needs fixing or this doesn't need fixing, but still wanting to do something about it and wanting to kind of fix things. So it's a paradox, and I think that muscle develops when you're within the paradox, and this is kind of a good segue into the last trauma sensitive value, which is collaboration and mutuality. So I mean, one of the things that I've been exploring, and I can't say that I can't say that I found this or I'm sourcing this or I've created this. It's something that I'm exploring. Is the quadrants of the brain and how they relate to the different emotions, the emotional calibration scale or the map of consciousness. I mean, one of the things that I experience, and this might be confirmation bias, but when I'm in the back quadrant of the left brain, to me, I kind of feel like, oh, this is where I'm processing what's safe for me, and I'm looking at my shame, and I'm looking at my fear, and I'm looking at my grief, and I'm looking at what are the conditions I need to feel safe. And then something happens, as I'm developing that emotion and I'm embracing fear. When I embrace my fear, I'm starting to get more clear about what I desire, which is the top front quadrant or the front quadrant to the right. So that's where I feel like when I'm focused on something that makes me angry or I'm focused on something that I'm proud about, then I also start to realize, well, what courage, what acts of courage am I willing to take? And again, this is just my subjective story, but this is where competition and that masculine linear drive comes from. Because when you develop enough courage, then you're into trust or neutrality, where you're starting to ask the questions, well, what do I need? What are the conditions? What are my values? So you start to work with the front left quadrant of the brain, where you start to you start to get curious. This is curiosity. So we started with safety, desire, curiosity. And I'm starting to ask, well, what do I need to trust? What is it that I'm willing to do? What is it? What do I need to be able to forgive and to really accept this for what it is? And then clarity starts to happen, and you go to the back right portion of the brain, which is appreciation, and that's where love comes in, joy, peace, experiences of peace, experiences of enlightenment start to become second nature. So from what my understanding of these four characters of the brain, they don't work in a vacuum. If you're not being mindfulness of your mindfulness, or if you're not aware of your awareness, that muscle goes undeveloped. It becomes atrophied. So yeah. Anyway, that's my little piece on in response to your question is, yeah, I think everybody has the potential, but it's kind of like lifting weights. You're not going to go out there and you're not going to lift a 200-pound weight over your head one time out. You got to start with, okay, what are my feelings of fear? That's like lifting a 5-pound weight. And then once I'm comfortable with fear, then it's a 10-pound weight. What do I want? What's my desire? Okay. And then you keep going up the emotional scale. And as long as you're not beating yourself up or judging yourself, and when you're judging others, in a lot of ways, that's a reflection of the judgments you have on yourself. Um, that's kind of what kind of makes that muscle atrophy. And so yeah, so to me, to be able to be in a collaborative space where you're truly seeing the other person as an expression of God, as your equal, as as source energy, that's what collaborative spaces are, where there's that mutual respect, there's that collaboration. And that's hard to do in our society. It's really hard to do in our society, because especially in the middle class, and I shared a graphic a few weeks ago about kind of like the difference in values of the social classes. Most of us in the middle class, we've become self-sufficient. We're focused on achievement, and it's very easy to fall into that paradigm of scoring points, of trying to gain an advantage. And that's a skill that gets developed as well too, is being able to collaborate effectively, to truly listen, to truly respond, to truly be present. So yeah, so my experience has been, I think everybody has the potential, but again, it's whether or not you're willing to go into the gym, so to speak, and work on where you're really at, and not judge yourself for feeling fear, or for expressing anger, or for really integrating those deep emotions, because that's been my experience as well, is that when somebody is having an emotional moment, or they're expressing themselves, they're expressing their anger, or they're expressing their grief, that they get oscillated, they get marginalized and punished for that, because it makes people feel uncomfortable. um, but I think getting comfortable with that, and getting comfortable with the paradox, is the pathway towards collaboration, to being able to be in more mutually respectful places, where authority and hierarchy doesn't hold power over you, over the individual.
Yeah. And again, this comes back to the recovery community
Yeah,
type of situation. Um, the first three steps are basically just increasing your understanding, your awareness of what the problem is. The first step,
exactly.
talking about powerlessness over alcohol. I can't control the amount of booze when I ingest it, and because I've been really trying hard to control it, I've neglected other aspects of my life, and therefore, again, basically, my life is unmanageable. Because again, if you're not putting any attention to do anything other than just this one thing. There's this obsession. you know, again, life is a mess. Okay. And again, without trying to take this time here to get into all the minutia and stuff. But then the second step is the proposed solution, having a spiritual awakening, or, that stuff. Came to wording is came to believe a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Type of stuff. Now, for myself, when I approached that step, I had 3 years of abstinence, and the insanity in the meetings where it was always referencing to what was going on while I was actively drinking, or each individual's drunken debauchery and all that, and the shame and regrets and all that. So it was really difficult at the time. I'm like, well, I as far as that insanity goes, I haven't been drinking for 3 years. That is really diminished and stuff. And I was very fortunate that Alan, who was guiding me through this process, brought up how there was still things from my past that was haunting me.
Mm,
As we were talking about being triggered and such. And that was my, again, I was wishing for a different past. But
mm,
that was my
mm.
insanity because detached from it, you're just like, what's done is done, dude. How those people treated you and stuff. Yeah, there's still an emotional charge with all that, that memory and stuff. But come on, if it's not personal, then yeah, you can just kind of see it for what it is. Again, if like somebody was sharing to me, again, it kind of is just like, yeah, it sucks that happened to you, but there's nothing you can do now as a 43-year-old man about the stuff that happened to you as a 10-year-old boy.
Right.
That's again, so that was the insanity there. And then the third step in me making the decision to turn your will and life over the care of God as you understand Him. That's making the commitment to get into this next process that I think is key to understand when you're talking about building the muscle.
Mhm.
Again, all of these things are really leading up to going, yeah, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Okay. And, it was explained to me that, again, I had these narratives that were blocking me from my essence, my being, my consciousness, that of a power greater than myself being intimate with me. And this fourth step is the personal inventory. And again, you go through this and you make a column of all the things that you're resentful about, which, hey, most people, yeah, we don't have too much difficulty of saying who we're angry at. And that part's the easy part. But then you start working with those names or institutions and you start going horizontally across this and seeing how it affects things. Well, without trying to explain the whole process and stuff, fear is one of the categories. Was
Mhm.
fear involved with that relationship? Yeah, fear was, again, I was checking these boxes. I could have just taken a pencil and just drawn a line straight down with every one of them. It's like fear was driving my behavior in all these unhealthy behavior relationships, or relationships that involved unhealthy behavior. So again, this kind of stuff is like, once you now see this is my modus operandi. And the fifth step is you share this with another human being that gets you past the blind spots of it.
Yep.
But then, like this, but if you sit still and you start letting that percolate, then it's like, what do I want? Okay, you have now the ability of choice. You can, again, I've made a commitment doing whatever I want. Do I really truly want to live in a different manner where fear is not so prevalent in all my relationships? So what I'm getting at is again, there was a process that got to the point where slowly I was, dissolving that force field to protect me from being hurt, judged, and stuff, condemned, by sharing these deep dark truths. Again, I was getting to the truth of the matter, and once you did it with at least one person, and and typically when you are sharing these things, that they're affirming, it's like, yeah, me too, yeah, of course, yeah, I've done it too. You mean I'm not the only person in the world? No, you're not the only person in the world. And so, don't need to share any other everybody's stories and stuff, but trust me, I've heard many of them times. Many other people in those meetings you go to, yes, they felt the same. Wow, and again, it's as you go through the process. Again, you are starting now. If nothing else, you've just gotten into the gym. You may not even really have started or exercise regime, but that's getting into really what they'll call the maintenance steps, commonly referred to. For myself, this is where the greatest growth was. Is again, now that I've seen this stuff, made my amends and all that jazz. 10 is basically self-awareness. 11 is spirituality, and 12 is service. And this is what I believe is the pillars of the lifestyle that I've been fortunate enough to live. and stuff. If I have self-awareness, and again, I understand my behavior patterns, but more importantly, in the present, in this moment, what is going on? What again, my am I feeling fight or flight? On or freeze, kind of situation. Or even sometimes I might get a little overzealous and giddy and stuff. And it's like, calm down, dude. Again, I'm not on a relatively neutral plane and stuff. I'm very emotional. You know, and what helps with that again is the spirituality we talked about again, awareness of awareness and such. But maybe going offline. That's more online. This is offline type of stuff.
Yeah.
But really, where all of a sudden there gets the X factor involved is the service, which what you've been talking about is to be the type of leader, which does not mean that I'm a superior, but I have just have, I don't know, a few more steps on this journey than the person I'm with. They may not have any awareness of this stuff that has been revealed to me, and to understand that that's okay. And then, frankly, I default to that because, yeah, this is 18 years that I'm talking about. This stuff came drip by drip and stuff. I had a conversation on Friday with a gentleman who has 18 months, and he's had previous times of long-term sobriety and such, but he was just recommitting to this journey, and he was kind of pulling another layer off the onion and stuff, getting a little bit deeper. And I had to be very present and understand what was important to him, um, and have a conversation where, I did what helped dissolve that was letting him express myself. I wasn't trying to give him the answers because again, the paradigm, I don't need to fix him.
Right.
I don't need to fix anyone. Our souls are complete. It's those narratives that separate us from that wellness, that wisdom that is just blocking us from that, again, that innate gift we have of life. And to understand, yeah, if I do talk to somebody that is, I don't know, manipulative, I used the word earlier and stuff, is to understand it's just their mind that's doing that, their personal thinking, that conditioned thinking and stuff. Who they are, behind that and stuff is, the manifestation of source, God.
Yep.
When we talk about we're all God's kids and stuff, that's God's kids is the person that's behind all that conditioning, all that trauma and
Yes.
stuff, which again, human condition. Yeah, of course, humans, we protect ourselves. We come from a long line of survivors and stuff, whether it was physical or emotional, psychological ways we protected ourselves. But our our DNA goes way, way back that people figured out a way to survive at least long enough to make babies and raise those babies to the point where they could make babies. You know, and, um, and here we are in a time where we don't have to necessarily worry about the same things our ancestors did. We don't have to worry about necessarily of, I don't know, pirates or bandits or whatever and all that kind of stuff to survive. But we still have ingrained upon us and stuff. We're perpetually, is this friend or foe?
Yep.
And the way that discernment's done, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, is these things that we've been referring to as trauma.
Yeah. Very, very good summation there. Yes, Randy. Yeah, yeah, and that's where I think there's the potential for human evolution as well too. Is being able to have these kinds of conversations, which helps the brain to develop, to be able to go from that competitive cultural conditioning into more collaborative spaces where our options, our choices, are more present to us. Yeah. So I'm gonna wrap up today's conversation, but thank you for this, Randy. We covered the 12 steps of the recovery program. We've covered the 5 values of trauma informed care, which is helping us have these conversations around trauma informed leadership. So it's pretty neat that we're role modeling how to have these kinds of living library conversations, because I have an exciting adventure coming up this week where I'm bringing together 4 different communities, in my area here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to start to talk about, how do we collaborate across communities? How do we get past this competitive urge and really come into a space where we're all really one big community? And how do we help each other? So yeah, so I'm excited. So just to recap, those five values that we covered were safety, transparency, voice choice empowerment, mutuality and collaboration, and peer support. Peer support. So, Randy, what did you appreciate about our time together before we close out? What do you feel will reverberate into the future here as you reflect on this conversation today?
Well, again, you have provoked responses out of myself that saw how these things that were developed in a safe space
Mhm,
can be transposed into a space that may not necessarily be safe. you know, but again, that's narratives and all that kind of stuff. But to bring this into a larger audience,
mhm,
um, yeah, again, is you get to do this important work and stuff, bringing four different communities together and start having them ponder in their own unique ways, like I just did.
mhm,
How do we take these principles and apply them into our daily lives, into our homes, not just the workplace and stuff? Where are the ripples going to go from that? So I'm going to take time and see how I do this in my own unique way. How do I bring this into my home and into my workplace and stuff, into my recovery meetings and stuff. So yeah, that's what I appreciate most of all.
awesome. All right, thank you, Randy. So this was Randy Hyden, and this was the Living Library. Thank you for watching, and I'm going to be back in a couple of days. Randy and I have a friend, Nini Castle, and we'll be doing a Living Library conversation with her in a couple of days. So I'll be on the lookout for that.